He said it the way people talk about weather, without looking at me. This house is my wife's now. Not angry, not loud, just finished. At 72, I had buried a husband, paid off a mortgage, and learned how silence can bruise deeper than shouting. I remember thinking, very clearly, that something had ended right there at the kitchen table, between my chipped mug and his untouched coffee. My name is Margaret Lewis. I am 72 years old, and I have lived in this house for 34 years. I scrubbed its floors on my knees when my back was young, patched the roof myself after storms, and planted the apple tree out back the spring my son turned 10. None of that mattered in that moment. What mattered was that my son, Daniel, had decided I was furniture. Old, in the way, easily moved. His wife, Lorna, sat beside him, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look at me at all. That hurt more than the sentence. It told me this had been discussed, planned, agreed upon without my presence, like renovations or trash pickup. I asked him what he meant, even though I understood perfectly. Sometimes you ask questions just to hear how far someone is willing to go. Daniel sighed. He always sighed when he wanted to sound reasonable. Mom, let's not make this dramatic. Lorna and I are married. We need stability. It's logical the house should be in her name. You're not getting any younger. There it was. The gentle shove toward the edge. Age used like a towel to wipe hands clean. I reminded him, quietly, that the deed was in my name, that I paid the taxes, that his father and I bought this place when Daniel still slept with the light on. Lorna finally looked up then. She smiled, thin and patient, like a nurse explaining something obvious. That can be changed, she said. We already looked into it. It's just paperwork. Just paperwork. I had spent my whole life doing paperwork. Bills, forms, signatures that kept roofs overhead and food on tables. They thought I was tired, confused, ready to be managed. Daniel leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. We made an appointment with a notary next week. You'll sign, and this tension can stop. You can stay here, of course. We're not monsters. Stay. Like a guest. Like a tolerated habit. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I nodded once, the way women my age do when we're deciding something that doesn't need an audience. Inside, something steady took its place where the ache had been. Not anger. Clarity. After they left the kitchen, I sat alone and listened to the house settle. Pipes clicked. The clock over the sink kept time, loyal as ever. I placed my hand on the table where my husband used to rest his palm, and I understood something simple. If they believed this was just paperwork, then paperwork was exactly how this would be answered. If you enjoy the stories here, dear, you're welcome to join our Patreon. There you'll find exclusive tales that never appear on YouTube, and new stories come out earlier than anywhere else. The link is just below. We're waiting for you. The next morning, Lorna reorganized my kitchen. She didn't announce it. She didn't ask. I came downstairs and found my spices moved into matching glass jars, my old kettle pushed to the back of the counter, and the drawer where I kept rubber bands and batteries emptied into a plastic bin labeled MISC. I stood there longer than necessary, letting the picture settle. This was how it would be now. Small takeovers. Quiet corrections. You'll get used to it, Lorna said, breezing past me with a cup of coffee she hadn't brewed. It's more efficient this way. Efficiency had become her favorite word. Efficient meals, efficient storage, efficient use of space. By space, she meant me. Daniel left early for work, as he always did when things were uncomfortable. He kissed Lorna on the cheek and nodded at me like a neighbor. I noticed he no longer asked if I needed anything from the store. That habit had disappeared months ago, around the time they stopped paying their share of the utilities and started calling it temporary. I washed my cup and set it in the drying rack. Lorna watched me like she expected resistance. When none came, she relaxed. That was her mistake. People confuse quiet with surrender. At my age, quiet is simply time bought. Later that day, she brought up the guest room. "It would make sense for you to move upstairs," she said, scrolling through photos on her phone. "We're thinking of turning the downstairs bedroom into an office. Daniel works from home sometimes now." The downstairs bedroom was where my husband died. She didn't know that. Or maybe she did, and it didn't register as relevant. Either way, I told her I would think about it. She smiled again, satisfied. To her, "I'll think about it," meant eventually. She didn't understand that for me it meant, "I'm measuring you." In the afternoon, I went to the small desk in my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were folders I hadn't touched in years. Deeds, insurance papers, tax records, old bank statements folded the way my husband used to fold them. I laid them out slowly, one by one, like pieces of a map. The house was paid off 18 years ago. I had the receipt. I paid property taxes every year on time, from my own account. When Daniel lost his job 5 years back, I covered the mortgage on his car for 9 months. When Lorna wanted to start fresh after the wedding, I paid for the new appliances. None of it had ever been called a loan. That was my mistake. In the evening, Daniel mentioned the notary again, casually, like dinner plans. "Thursday at 10, he said. "It's easier if we all just do it together." I nodded. I asked which notary. He looked surprised, then told me the name. He didn't ask why I wanted to know. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. I wasn't angry. Anger burns energy you don't get back. What I felt was something steadier, colder, and far more useful. I had raised a son. I had run a household on one income after a funeral. I knew how systems worked. They thought this was about family. They were wrong. I spent the next day walking through the house as if I were a visitor, not its owner. That was easier than it should have been. When you live somewhere long enough, you stop seeing it. You move around memory instead of walls. I wanted to see the walls again. I started in the hallway. The scuff on the baseboard near the door was from Daniel's bike, the summer he learned to ride without training wheels. I had told him not to ride indoors. He did anyway. I never fixed the mark. It felt like proof that life had passed through here. The living room smelled faintly of the lemon polish Lorna used, too sharp for my taste. My armchair sat an inch closer to the wall than it used to. I knew because my hand brushed the lamp when I sat down now. Small adjustments, barely noticeable, but they added up. That was the trick. If you move things slowly enough, people doubt their own memory. On the mantel were fewer photographs than before. I counted. 3 missing. My wedding picture. One of Daniel at 8, missing his front tooth. A faded photo of my husband in the garden, sleeves rolled up, dirt on his cheek. I found them later stacked neatly in a drawer, face down, not thrown away. Just removed from sight. In the kitchen, Lorna had replaced my old calendar with a whiteboard. On it, she'd written appointments in neat blue letters. Daniel's meetings, her yoga class, grocery delivery. My name appeared once. Margaret. Meds? With a question mark. I erased it with my finger. The board squeaked softly, like a complaint. That afternoon, I sat at the table and went through my folders properly. Not emotionally, practically. Dates, amounts, names. I wrote everything down in a notebook I'd kept since my 40s. I'd always trusted paper more than screens. Paper doesn't forget when systems change. The deed was clear. Sole ownership. No liens. No shared interest. I'd never added Daniel's name, no matter how many times people told me I should. For simplicity, they said, in case something happens. Something had happened, just not the way they meant. I found a letter from the bank, dated 12 years back, congratulating me on the final mortgage payment. I remembered that day. I'd made tea, sat at this same table, and cried. Not from joy, but relief. Relief that no one could ever take this roof from me. In the evening, Daniel and Lorna came home together. They were laughing about something on his phone. When they saw me, the laughter softened but didn't stop. I was background noise now, a presence to step around. "Did you think about the upstairs room?" Lorna asked, dropping her bag on the counter. "I did," I said. Daniel looked up, alert. "And?" "I'm staying where I am." There was a pause. Not long, but noticeable. Lorna tilted her head, studying me, like she was recalculating a route. "We'll talk about it later," she said finally. Daniel nodded, relieved. He liked postponement. It felt like peace to him. That night, I wrote one more list. Not documents. People. Who still spoke to me without needing something. Who called without an agenda. The list was short. Shorter than I'd like. But it existed. Before bed, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom and looked back at the house. Dim and quiet. I didn't feel sentimental. I felt resolved. Houses don't protect you just because you love them. They protect you because the law says they do, and because you're willing to remind others of that fact. On Thursday, we would go to the notary they chose. But it would not be the only appointment that day. The fourth day passed without open conflict, which made it heavier than the others. Silence, when shared space is forced, has weight. I felt it in my shoulders as I moved through the rooms, careful not to apologize with my body the way I used to. I no longer stepped aside automatically. I no longer hurried. In the morning, I went to the bank. The clerk was young enough to be my granddaughter, polite in that careful way people use with the elderly when they expect confusion. I corrected that impression quickly. I asked for printed statements going back 10 years. I asked about automatic payments. I asked about authorizations. When she hesitated, I waited. Waiting is a skill you learn when men assume they have time and you don't. By the time I left, I had a folder thick enough to matter. At home, Lorna was on the phone, voice low and sharp. She ended the call when she saw me, smiling too fast. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," I said. She glanced at the folder in my hands. "Organizing?" "Yes." She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the papers longer than necessary. That pleased me more than it should have. I spent the afternoon cross-checking dates. Property tax receipts matched my bank withdrawals. Repairs I'd paid for after Daniel moved back in, plumbing, electrical, the new water heater he'd promised to reimburse, were all there. He never had. I hadn't chased him. Mothers rarely do. We convince ourselves patience will be returned as gratitude. It isn't. I found something else, too. A document Daniel had asked me to sign 2 years earlier during what he'd called a boring administrative thing. I remembered it because I'd almost refused. A limited authorization. Access, not ownership. Temporary, he said. For convenience. It was still active. I sat very still when I realized that. That was not a mistake. That was planning. the kind that smiles while it reaches. That evening, Daniel mentioned the notary again, more firmly this time. "They're expecting us," he said. "Let's not complicate it." "I don't intend to," I replied. He studied me, frowning slightly. "You've been quiet." "I've always been quiet." "Yes," he said, uncertain. "But this feels different." It was. He sensed it and didn't like it. Men who rely on momentum panic when it stops. Later, after they went to bed, I made another call. Not to a friend, not to family, to a lawyer whose name I'd kept folded inside my address book for 15 years. We had spoken once, briefly, after my husband died. He remembered me. "I need an appointment," I said. "Tomorrow, if possible." There was a pause. Then, "Of course." I slept better that night than I had in weeks. In the morning, I dressed carefully, the way I used to when I ran meetings and signed contracts, not the way I dressed to be invisible. Lorna noticed. "You look nice," she said suspiciously. "Thank you." At the lawyer's office, I did not tell a story. I laid out facts. Ownership. Payments. Authorizations I wanted revoked. Future plans I wanted protected. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded once. "You're in a strong position," he said. "I know," I answered. "I just forgot." We prepared documents. Clear ones. Boring ones. The kind that hold up in rooms with polished tables and nervous smiles. When I returned home, Daniel was pacing. "The notary confirmed," he said. "Thursday at 10. Don't forget." "I won't," I said. That night, I placed my folder beside my bed. Not hidden, not locked away. Where I could see it if I woke up unsure. I wasn't unsure. They believed power lived in confidence and pressure. I had learned long ago that real power lives in preparation. By the 5th day, they stopped pretending this was a discussion. Daniel came home earlier than usual, jacket still on, phone in his hand like a shield. Lorna followed him, eyes bright with a purpose I recognized. Not anger. Strategy. They sat at the table without asking if I would join them, which was new. Before, they at least kept up the shape of manners. "We need to be clear," Daniel said. "This situation can't drag on." I poured myself tea and sat down anyway, slowly, deliberately. Silence makes people nervous when they're trying to control the pace. Lorna leaned forward. "We're not trying to push you out, Margaret. But you have to understand. Married couples need space, authority, a sense that this is our home." "Our," I repeated. "Yes," she said smoothly. "Ours." Daniel nodded, relieved she'd taken the lead. He always preferred someone else to say the sharp parts. I looked at him then, really looked, at the crease between his eyebrows that wasn't there when he was young, at the impatience he'd learned to wear like competence. I wondered when he'd decided that firmness and cruelty were the same thing. "You already live here," I said. "You've lived here for almost 2 years. You don't pay rent. You don't pay utilities. You haven't paid the property tax once." "That's not the point," Daniel snapped, then caught himself. "We contribute in other ways." Lorna placed her hand on his arm. "Daniel, let me," she turned to me, "if you sign the transfer, everything becomes simpler. You won't have to worry about paperwork, maintenance, decisions. We'll handle it. You can relax." Relax. Another word people use when they mean disappear. "And if I don't?" I asked. There it was, the moment they'd been circling. Daniel exhaled sharply. "Mom, don't do this." "Do what?" "Force our hand." Lorna didn't blink. "We've looked into alternatives. Senior housing. There's a nice complex 10 minutes from here. 1 bedroom. Quiet. Safe. I smiled then. Not because it was funny, but because the final piece had fallen into place. You already picked it out, I said. Daniel looked away. That was fast, I continued. You told me this was about stability, about family. But you've planned my absence down to the square footage. Lorna straightened. You're being unfair. No, I said calmly. I'm being accurate. Daniel's voice hardened. If you don't sign, this becomes unpleasant. For everyone. I waited a moment before answering. Long enough for the room to feel it. You mean you'll make it unpleasant for me, I said. Because you assume I'll fold. He opened his mouth, then closed it. That was answer enough. I stood up, took my cup, and walked to the sink. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I'd expected shaking. Fear. Something loud inside. Instead, there was only a clean, narrow focus. Thursday at 10, Daniel said behind me. Please don't embarrass us. I turned around. I won't, I said. But I can't promise the same for you. That night, Lorna didn't say goodnight. Daniel lingered in the doorway of my room, like he wanted to say something softer, something that would let him sleep. He didn't. He left instead. I sat on my bed and opened my folder again. I added one more page. Notes from the lawyer. Timelines. Options. I underlined one sentence twice. Consent under pressure is not consent. In the quiet, I thought about all the years I had swallowed words to keep peace. All the times I had paid, forgiven, smoothed things over so my son's life would be easier. He had mistaken that for weakness. Many people do. On Thursday, they expected a signature. What they would get instead was a lesson I had learned late, but learned well. You can raise a child with love and still refuse to be erased by them. The lock changed on a Tuesday. I noticed it in the afternoon when I came back from the pharmacy with my bag cutting into my wrist. My key went in halfway and stopped, wrong somehow, like it didn't belong anymore. I tried again, slower. Nothing. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the hum of traffic, feeling something tighten in my chest that had nothing to do with fear. Lorna opened the door. Oh, she said lightly, as if I were a delivery. I forgot to tell you. We had the locks updated. Security reasons. I looked past her into the hallway. My hallway. Daniel's shoes were by the door, his jacket on the hook. He was home. He hadn't warned me. That part mattered. Do I get a key? I asked. Of course, she said, still smiling. Daniel has it. He's in the office. I stepped inside. The house smelled different. Air freshener, something synthetic. I set my bag down and walked to the small room they'd claimed as an office. Daniel was at the desk, typing. He didn't look up until I spoke his name. The lock was changed. He rubbed his forehead. Yes, we meant to tell you. It's temporary. Everything seems temporary with you, I said. Except decisions. He stood up, already defensive. Mom, don't start. I'm not starting anything, I replied. You locked me out of my own house. Lorna appeared in the doorway. Please don't exaggerate. I turned to her. Please don't minimize. Silence fell, the kind that reveals things. Daniel cleared his throat. We're just setting boundaries, he said. This is stressful for Lorna. For me too, I answered. He didn't respond to that. I took the spare key from his hand without thanking him and went to my room. Inside, I noticed my dresser drawers had been rearranged. Not opened. Rearranged. As if someone had checked what space I took up. I sat on the bed and let the realizations settle fully this time. They were preparing to push. That evening, Daniel avoided me. Lorna cooked dinner and served it without asking if I wanted any. I ate toast in my room, crumbs on a napkin, like a child being punished without explanation. I wasn't angry. Anger needs hope. What I felt was recognition. Later, I made another list, not of documents, of moments. The lock, the upstairs suggestion, the erased calendar entry, each one small enough to deny, together large enough to prove intent. The next morning, Daniel knocked on my door. "We should talk," he said. I let him in. "We can't live like this," he began. "The tension, the hostility." "There is no hostility from me," I said. "Only resistance." He flinched. "You're making it hard for us." "No," I corrected him. "You are making it hard for yourselves by assuming I will eventually step aside." He sat down heavily. "You raised me better than this." I smiled faintly. "I did." "That's why I'm disappointed." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I saw confusion, not guilt. Confusion, as if the role he'd assigned me was no longer fitting. "Thursday," he said finally. "Just come on Thursday." "I will," I said. He stood, hesitated, then left without another word. After he went, I picked up my phone and checked the time of my other appointment. Everything was in order. Documents printed, copies made, instructions clear. I walked through the house one more time, touching the door frames, the banister, the wall by the stairs where Daniel's height was marked in pencil from years ago. I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt present. When people believe you are cornered, they become careless. They move faster. They show their hands. The lock was changed to make me feel small. Instead, it told me exactly how necessary Thursday would be. On Wednesday morning, I left the house without telling anyone where I was going. Lorna was in the living room, laptop open, speaking in the careful voice she used for people she wanted to impress. Daniel's door was closed. I took my purse, my folder, and my coat. I locked the door behind me with the new key and felt nothing about it at all. Locks are symbols only if you let them be. The lawyer's office smelled of paper and old coffee. It was comforting. Familiar. Mr. Callahan stood when I entered, which I noticed. People reveal their respect in small movements. "You came prepared," he said, glancing at the folder. "I came finished," I replied. We went through everything again, slowly. Ownership, occupancy, the authorization Daniel still had. Callahan's mouth tightened when he saw it. "That should have been revoked the moment trust changed," he said. "It is changing now," I answered. He explained my options, though by then I already knew which one I would choose. Not the loud one, not the cruel one, the clean one, the kind that holds even when voices rise. We prepared a formal revocation, immediate, legal. We prepared a notice of termination of informal occupancy, polite language. Clear dates, no insults. We prepared a revised estate plan, not punishment, protection. "You're certain?" he asked, pen hovering. "Yes." I signed without hesitation. My hand did not shake. That surprised him. By the time I left, the sky had clouded over. It felt appropriate. At home, Daniel was waiting in the kitchen. "Where were you?" he asked. "Out," I said, setting my purse down. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're entitled to." He stared at me, irritation flickering across his face. "You're acting like this is some kind of battle." "It is," I said calmly. "You just assumed you were the only one allowed to prepare." Lorna appeared, arms crossed. "We don't have time for this. Tomorrow is the appointment." "I know." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not planning anything strange, are you?" I met her gaze evenly. I'm planning exactly what's appropriate. That night, the house felt watchful. Doors closed softly. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. I wasn't excluded anymore. I was being monitored. I slept anyway. Thursday morning came quietly. I dressed in navy and gray, simple and neat. Not defensive, not apologetic. I placed my documents in my bag with care, the way you place something valuable but no longer fragile. Daniel drove. Lorna sat in the front seat. I sat in the back, watching familiar streets pass like old acquaintances. No one spoke. Daniel's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. At the notary's office, the waiting room was bright and bland. A woman behind the desk smiled at us, asked our names. Daniel gave his with confidence. Lorna corrected his pronunciation unnecessarily. I waited. "We're all here for a transfer of property," Daniel said, already reaching for his folder. The woman nodded. "The notary will see you shortly." We sat. Lorna checked her phone. Daniel tapped his foot. I sat still. When the door opened, it wasn't the man Daniel expected. It was a woman, older than me by a few years, glasses low on her nose. She looked at all three of us, then at the file in her hand. "Mr. Lewis?" she asked Daniel. "Yes." "And Mrs. Lewis?" she asked, turning to me. "Yes," I said. She smiled slightly. "Good. Before we begin, there's an update to the file." Daniel frowned. "What update?" She adjusted her papers. "Another document was submitted this morning. It will need to be addressed first." Lorna leaned forward. "By whom?" The notary looked at me. "By your mother," she said. Daniel turned slowly. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in days, he had nothing ready. I didn't look at him. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. I had not come to argue. I had come to be heard, on record, where silence no longer worked. Daniel stared at me as if I had stood up, speaking a language he didn't know. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then Lorna recovered first, as she always did. "What document?" she asked sharply. "There shouldn't be any other document." The notary did not answer her right away. She placed the folder on the table and adjusted her glasses, slow and precise. People like her are never rushed. They let others wear themselves out. "A revocation of prior authorization," she said, "effective immediately, and a notice concerning occupancy of the property." Daniel swallowed. "That's not possible. My mother agreed." "I agreed to attend," I said quietly, "not to surrender." He turned to me then, fully, his face tight. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm correcting an assumption," I replied. "Several, actually." Lorna laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "This is ridiculous. She's confused. You can't just—" The notary raised a hand. "Mrs. Lewis, I need you to refrain from interrupting. These documents are valid and properly filed." Confused. I had expected that word. It always comes out when control slips. Age becomes a convenient explanation for resistance. Daniel pushed his chair back. "You went behind our backs." "No," I said. "I went in front of the law." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "This isn't how families work." "This is exactly how families work," I answered. "When someone assumes they can take without asking, and someone else finally says no." The notary cleared her throat. "Mr. Lewis, the authorization you currently hold to access accounts and act on behalf of your mother has been revoked. As of today, you no longer have legal standing in that regard." Daniel froze. "That's temporary, right?" "No," the notary said. "It is not." Lorna stood up. "You're making a huge mistake." I looked at her. Really looked. at the certainty she had carried like armor since the day she moved in. "Mistakes are things you regret later," I said. "This is a decision." Daniel's voice dropped. "You're humiliating me." I thought of the lock, the erased photos, the apartment brochure. "No," I said. "I'm disappointing you. There's a difference." The notary turned a page. "There is also a formal notice here," she continued. "As sole owner of the property, Mrs. Lewis is requesting that you and your wife vacate the premises within the legally required time frame." Lorna gasped. Daniel stared at the table. "You're kicking us out?" he asked. "I'm asking you to leave," I said. "The same way you asked me to disappear, with paperwork." Silence filled the room. Thick, heavy, the kind that settles when a plan collapses. Daniel finally looked up. His eyes were wet, but his voice was hard. "After everything I've done?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to choose words that would last. "You didn't do those things for me," I said. "You did them expecting something in return. That's not care. That's investment." Lorna scoffed. "You'll regret this. You'll be alone." I met her gaze without blinking. "I was alone long before today," I said. "I just stopped pretending otherwise." The notary slid the papers toward me. "If you'll sign here to confirm acknowledgement." I signed, calmly, clearly. Daniel didn't look at me when we left the office. He walked ahead, shoulders stiff. Lorna followed, already whispering plans into her phone, still trying to control the narrative. I stepped out last. The air outside felt different, not lighter, truer. In the car, no one spoke. I watched the city pass by, ordinary and unchanged. That comforted me. The world hadn't ended because I said no. It rarely does. When we reached the house, Daniel stopped the engine but didn't turn it off. "You didn't have to do it like this," he said. "Yes," I replied softly. "I did." I got out of the car and walked toward the front door. My door. For the first time in weeks, I felt my age not as a weakness, but as proof. I had lived long enough to know when a line must be drawn. They packed in silence. Daniel avoided me completely that first evening. Lorna moved through the house quickly, opening drawers, closing them harder than necessary, speaking into her phone in clipped sentences. I stayed in my room and let them move. Control looks loud when it's failing. The next morning, I woke early and made myself breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee strong enough to remind me I was awake and allowed to be. I ate at the table, not my room. When Lorna walked in and stopped short, I met her eyes and kept chewing. She turned away without a word. By noon, boxes appeared. Cardboard scraping along floors I had refinished with my own hands years ago. I noticed what they took first. Electronics, clothes, the expensive things. They left behind what didn't suit their future. Daniel finally spoke to me that afternoon, standing in the doorway like a guest. "You didn't have to involve lawyers," he said. "I didn't involve them," I replied. "I used them." He sighed, that old familiar sound. "This didn't have to be so extreme. It only feels extreme because you expected obedience," I said. "You never asked for consent." He looked tired then, older than his years. For a moment, I saw the boy who once cried when he thought I'd forgotten to pick him up from school. That memory hurt more than anything else so far. "What am I supposed to tell people?" he asked. "The truth," I said. "That you assumed something that wasn't yours." He nodded once, stiffly, and left. That evening, my phone rang. I knew the number before I looked. It was Claire. My granddaughter's voice came through thin but steady. "Grandma, Dad told me some things. I wanted to hear from you. I sat down, carefully. Some conversations deserve your full body. I didn't throw anyone out, I said before she could ask. I set boundaries. There was a pause. Then, I know, she said softly. I figured. That surprised me. You did? Yes. I've seen how they talk to you. I just didn't know how bad it got. I closed my eyes for a moment. I didn't either. Not until recently. They're saying you're angry, she continued. That you're cutting them off. I'm not angry, I said. I'm done pretending. Another pause, then a small exhale. I'm proud of you. That nearly broke me. I held it together because that's what age teaches you. Not how to feel less, but how to hold more without spilling. You're always welcome here, I told her. No conditions. I know, she said. That's the difference. After we hung up, I sat very still for a long time. Some losses hurt less when one thing remains intact. The next days were procedural. Dates discussed. Boxes carried out. Lorna barely acknowledged me now. Daniel said thank you once, quietly, like a reflex. I nodded. Gratitude spoken too late doesn't heal, but it does close a door properly. On the third evening, the house was half empty of them. The guest room cleared, the office stripped, the whiteboard gone from the kitchen wall, leaving a pale square behind. I scrubbed it clean myself. That night, I found the old photo of my husband and me tucked into a box they'd forgotten. I placed it back on the mantel, right in the center. On the fourth morning, Daniel stood by the door with his keys. We'll be out by Friday, he said. I know. He hesitated. I never meant to hurt you. I believe that, I said. But intention doesn't erase impact. He nodded once more and left. When the door closed, the house exhaled. Or maybe I did. I walked through each room, opening windows, letting air move where tension had been sitting. The house didn't feel lonely. It felt restored, like a body after a fever breaks. That evening, I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the back step, watching the light fade. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't grieving. I was standing exactly where I belonged. And for the first time in a long while, no one was trying to move me. On Friday morning, the house sounded hollow. Not empty. Hollow. There's a difference you notice only after years in one place. The echo of footsteps. The way sound travels farther than it should. Daniel and Lorna were still upstairs, finishing what they called packing, though most of the work had already been done. What remained were the last decisions people avoid until time runs out. I made coffee and sat at the table with my notebook open, not to write anything important, just to keep my hands steady. Outside, the apple tree was losing its leaves early this year. The ground beneath it was already spotted with yellow. Nothing dramatic, just change happening on schedule. Lorna came down first. She avoided my eyes and went straight to the cupboard, then stopped. The shelves were bare where her glass jars used to be. I had put my old spice tins back the night before, quietly, without ceremony. She stood there for a moment, then closed the cupboard harder than necessary. Daniel followed, keys in hand. He looked around like someone leaving a hotel room they hadn't enjoyed, but still expected to be thanked for staying. The truck will be here in an hour, he said. I know. He hesitated, then added, We'll need to come back later for a few things. You'll need to call first, I said, and it will be when I'm home. That stung him. I saw it. Boundaries always do it first. You don't trust us? He asked. I considered the question carefully. No, I said. I don't. He nodded slowly, as if filing that away for later use. though there would be no later use now. The truck arrived on time. Two young men moved efficiently, polite but curious, glancing at me the way people do when they sense a story they're not part of. I stayed out of their way. This wasn't about supervision. It was about completion. While they worked, I walked through the upstairs rooms one last time. The guest room looked stripped, the carpet pale where furniture had been. The office was just a room again. No desk, no ambition, just space. In the hallway, I stopped at the wall where Daniel's height was marked. Pencil lines, dates. I ran my finger over them once, then took a cloth and wiped them away. Not in anger, in acceptance. That chapter didn't need to be preserved on drywall. By noon, the truck was full. Lorna stood by the open door, phone pressed to her ear, already narrating a version of events where she was calm, reasonable, wronged. Daniel lingered behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed somewhere above my shoulder. "Well," he said. "I guess this is it?" "Yes," I replied. He looked at me then, searching my face for something. Regret, softness, an opening. I gave him none, but I didn't harden either. "You're my son," I said. "That doesn't change. But this arrangement is over, permanently." He swallowed. "And if we need help?" "You'll figure it out," I said. "You always do. Just not on my back anymore." He nodded once, then twice. He stepped outside. Lorna didn't say goodbye. When the truck pulled away, the street returned to its usual quiet. No applause. No relief that needed announcing. I closed the door and turned the lock. My lock. The sound was small but final. I spent the afternoon cleaning, not obsessively, intentionally. I washed the mugs they used, put my own back in their places. I aired out the rooms. I carried their forgotten things to a box by the door, odds and ends that would be picked up later, or not at all. In the early evening, I sat down and opened a fresh folder. Inside, I placed copies of everything finalized that week. Clear labels, no emotions, just order. Then I made one more call. My granddaughter answered on the second ring. "They moved out," I said. "I know," she replied. "Dad called." I waited. "He didn't sound angry," she added. "Just smaller." "That will pass," I said. "Or it won't." "Can I come by tomorrow?" she asked. "Just to sit with you." "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." After we hung up, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights come on, one by one. The house felt like itself again, not younger, not brighter, just honest. I wasn't proud. I wasn't ashamed. I had done what needed doing, at the age when people expect you to endure instead. And that, I thought, was its own quiet kind of victory. The notary came again the following week, this time to my dining table. Her name was Ruth. She arrived exactly on time, coat folded over her arm, leather case carried like something familiar and respected. She didn't rush. People who know the weight of documents never do. We sat across from each other, sunlight coming in through the window Daniel once called too old-fashioned. Ruth laid out the papers neatly, as if order itself were a courtesy. "This will finalize the trust," she said, "and this confirms the changes to your will." I nodded. I had read every page twice the night before. I knew what each sentence did and did not do. Age has taught me not to sign what I don't fully understand, no matter who asks. My granddaughter, Emily, sat quietly in the corner. She hadn't asked to be present. I had asked her, not for support, but for witness. Some moments deserve to be seen by someone who will remember them without distortion. Ruth explained the trust again, even though she didn't need to. A protected structure. My assets shielded. Access limited. Emily named beneficiary, but not owner. Not yet. No one could pressure her the way I had been pressured. That was the point. "You've thought this through," Ruth said, looking at me over her glasses. "I've lived this through," I replied. I signed. The pen felt solid in my hand, no tremor, no pause. Emily watched me closely. When I finished, she reached out and squeezed my fingers once. She didn't cry. Neither did I. This wasn't a sad moment. It was a careful one. After Ruth left, we made tea. The house felt different with Emily in it. Lighter, but not careless. She noticed things Daniel never did. The way the floor creaked near the stairs. The way the afternoon light hit the wall just before sunset. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, staring into her cup, "for not speaking up sooner." I shook my head. "You're not responsible for what adults choose to ignore." She looked at me then, eyes serious. "I won't ignore it." That mattered. In the days that followed, messages came from Daniel, from Lorna, some angry, some careful, some pretending nothing permanent had happened. I answered none of them. Silence, when chosen, is not punishment. It is maintenance. One afternoon, Daniel showed up unannounced. I didn't open the door right away. I finished rinsing my hands, dried them, then opened it fully. He stood there empty-handed. That was new. "I just wanted to talk," he said. "I know," I replied. "But today isn't for that." He looked past me, into the hallway. "You really changed things." "Yes." "For Emily," he said. "For myself," I corrected gently. "She benefits because she didn't hurt me." He absorbed that quietly, then nodded. "I'll call next time." "Please do." He left without another word. That evening, I walked through the house again, but differently now. Not measuring, not guarding, simply noticing. I touched the back of a chair, straightened a frame, opened a window. I wasn't reclaiming anything. I was inhabiting it. Later, I sat down and wrote one final note in my notebook. Not legal, not emotional, just true. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with rules. I closed the book and put it away. Outside, the apple tree dropped another leaf. It landed quietly on the ground, exactly where it was supposed to. The silence didn't last. It never does when people realize the old rules no longer apply. Daniel called 3 days after the trust was finalized. I let it ring. Then again the next morning. Then a message, carefully written, as if tone could soften consequence. "We need to meet." There's been a misunderstanding. There hadn't been. But misunderstandings are comforting words. They suggest accidents, not choices. He showed up that afternoon anyway. I saw his car from the window and felt nothing rise in me. Not dread, not hope. That was how I knew I was ready. I opened the door before he knocked. He stepped inside slowly, looking around as if the house might reject him. It didn't. Houses don't take sides. They remember. "I heard you set everything up," he said. "Legally." "Yes." "And Emily." He stopped. "You really did that?" "I did." He sat at the table without being invited, hands flat on the wood. I noticed then how much he looked like his father when he was tired. That softened me, but it didn't bend me. "You cut me out," he said quietly. "No," I answered. "I removed your leverage." He flinched at that. Good. Truth often lands hard when it's precise. "I was just trying to make things easier," he said. "You know how complicated life is now." "I do," I replied. "That's why I simplified mine." He leaned back, frustration leaking through his careful voice. "You didn't even tell me about the second notary." I walked into that room like an idiot. I held his gaze. That's how I felt when you scheduled the first one. Silence stretched between us, not hostile, just bare. Lorna's name surfaced next, as I knew it would. She's taking this badly, he said. She thinks you've turned Emily against us. I smiled faintly. Emily can think for herself. That's why she scares people who need control. He shook his head. You don't understand how this looks. I understand exactly, I said. It looks like an older woman refusing to be quietly displaced. That always makes people uncomfortable. He rubbed his face, tired now. What do you want, Mom? I considered the question. It deserved honesty. I want peace, I said, and I want my decisions to stand without debate. And us? He asked. I want distance, I answered. Enough for respect to grow if it ever will. He stared at the table, jaw tight. Then, softly, you really thought this through? Yes. For a long time? For years, I said. I just didn't know it yet. He stood slowly, as if accepting gravity again. I guess I didn't think you'd actually stop. That's the mistake people make, I said. They think endurance means consent. At the door, he paused. You know I never meant to take everything. I know, I replied, but you were willing to take enough. He nodded once and left. That evening, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was the notary, Ruth, unannounced, which surprised me. She looked serious. I wanted to inform you in person, she said as we sat. There was an inquiry today about your property. My pulse stayed steady. From whom? Your son's wife, she said. She asked whether there was any legal way to contest the trust or the occupancy notice. I waited. There isn't, Ruth continued, not based on what exists. But I wanted you to know. Sometimes pressure increases when options decrease. Thank you, I said. I appreciate the warning. When she left, I stood at the window for a long time. The street was quiet, ordinary, safe. I didn't feel threatened. I felt confirmed. That night, I slept deeply, without dreams. The kind of sleep that comes when your mind no longer needs to rehearse arguments. In the morning, I made a small change. I replaced the front doormat. The old one was worn thin, letters faded. The new one was plain. No message. No welcome, no warning. Just a clean surface and a closed door. I stood there a moment, looking at it, then stepped back inside. Some victories don't announce themselves. They simply make space for you to live. The backlash arrived quietly, which made it more dangerous. It didn't start with shouting or threats. It started with neighbors asking questions, polite ones, the kind wrapped in concern. Had everything been resolved? Was Daniel doing all right? Someone mentioned hearing that I'd changed my will suddenly. Another asked if I was feeling well. I smiled. I answered carefully. I learned who had been spoken to and how the story was being shaped. That was when I understood Lorna hadn't stopped trying to manage the outcome. She had simply changed tactics. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a legal office I didn't recognize. The envelope was heavy, the paper expensive. Inside was a formal inquiry. Nothing actionable, just probing. Questions about my mental capacity at the time documents were signed. Suggestions of undue influence. I read it once. Then again. Then I placed it in my folder without comment. That evening, Daniel called. You got something in the mail today, he said. Yes. She's just upset, he added quickly. Lorna. She feels excluded. Excluded from what? I asked. From my life or from my assets? He didn't answer. "She's talking about contesting," he said instead. "She's welcome to talk," I replied. "The law listens, not gossips." He sighed. "Why are you making this so hard?" I closed my eyes for a moment. "Daniel," I said gently, "you don't miss me. You miss access." That hurt him. I heard it in the silence that followed. The next day, Emily came over with groceries I hadn't asked for. She moved through the kitchen easily now, like someone who belonged without trying to take over. "They're furious," she said quietly. "Mom's telling everyone you've been manipulated." "I know." "She wants to meet with me," Emily continued. "Alone." I looked at my granddaughter carefully. "And what do you want?" "I want to say no," she said. "But I wanted to tell you first." "That's already the right instinct," I said. She nodded, relieved. "I won't go." That night I made another call, to my lawyer. We didn't dramatize. We prepared. A response to the inquiry, medical records confirming capacity, witness statements, timelines, boring, unshakable facts. Pressure thrives on doubt. It starves on clarity. A week later, Daniel showed up again. This time, he was angry. "You've turned everyone against us," he said the moment he stepped inside. "I haven't spoken against you at all," I replied. "You didn't have to," he snapped. "Your silence did enough." I looked at him, this grown man I had once carried through a fever, and felt something like grief, but cleaner. "I didn't turn anyone," I said. "People see what they see when the noise stops." He paced the room. "Lorna's parents think you're cruel." "That's unfortunate. She's losing sleep over this." "So did I said. "For years." He stopped. His shoulders dropped slightly. "You really won't help us anymore, will you?" "I will help in emergencies," I said. "Illness, safety, real need, not lifestyle maintenance." He shook his head. "That's not how family works." "That's exactly how family works when love is not confused with entitlement," I replied. He stood there for a long time, then laughed once, bitterly. "I never thought you'd be like this." I met his eyes. Neither did I. After he left, I sat alone at the table, listening to the clock. I felt tired, but not worn down. There's a difference between fatigue and depletion. I was tired from standing upright, not from being crushed. A few days later, Ruth called. "The inquiry has been withdrawn," she said. "No grounds." I thanked her and hung up. I didn't celebrate. I made soup. That evening, as I stirred the pot, I thought about how strange it was that people only call women strong after they stop being useful, as if strength begins where service ends. I served myself dinner, ate slowly, and washed the dishes. The storm hadn't passed. It had simply realized it couldn't move me, and that, I knew, was the beginning of the end. They left on a Monday, not with drama, not with apologies, just with the quiet efficiency of people who want to be done without admitting defeat. Daniel came with a rented van, no moving company this time. Lorna stayed in the car, engine running, phone in her hand. She never crossed the threshold again. I watched from the kitchen window as Daniel carried the last boxes out. He moved more slowly than before, like the house itself had weight now. When he reached the van, he paused, resting a hand on the door, and looked back at the front of the house. At the windows. At the door. He didn't wave. I didn't either. When the van pulled away, the street swallowed the sound almost immediately. No echo. No lingering presence. I stood there longer than necessary, then turned back inside and closed the door. The click of the lock was final, but not triumphant, just complete. That afternoon, I walked through every room again, not to check for damage, not to reclaim, just to see what remained. In the hallway closet, I found an old scarf of mine Lorna had borrowed once and never returned. It smelled faintly of her perfume. I washed it and hung it back in its place. In the bathroom cabinet, a half-used bottle of expensive lotion. I threw it out without ceremony. Some things are not worth passing on. In the living room, the furniture looked oddly generous, as if it had been holding its breath. I moved my armchair back to where it had always been. The lamp no longer brushed my hand when I sat. That felt right. The guest room was empty now. No bed, no borrowed life, just space. I opened the window and let cold air rush in, sharp and clean. The room didn't feel sad. It felt unfinished, which is a kind of hope people don't talk about much. The next day, I received a final message from Daniel. We're settled. I hope you're okay. I read it twice, then put the phone down. I didn't reply, not out of punishment, out of honesty. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't reopen something better left sealed. Emily came over that evening. She brought bread from the bakery and a bottle of soup she'd made herself. We ate at the table, talking about ordinary things. Her work, a book she was reading, the neighbor's new dog. At one point, she stopped and looked around. It feels different, she said. Yes, I agreed. It's mine again. She smiled. It always was. That night, after she left, I sat alone in the living room with the lights off, just the glow from the street filtering through the curtains. I thought about the years I had confused endurance with love, how easily women my age are taught to shrink to preserve peace, how silence is praised when it makes others comfortable and criticized when it protects us. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned. In the following days, the world adjusted. Slowly. Neighbors stopped asking questions. The whispers thinned out. People lose interest when there's no spectacle to feed on. That suited me fine. I made small changes, not renovations, corrections. I replaced the worn rug, fixed the loose hinge on the back door, pruned the apple tree, careful and precise. It would bear less fruit next season, but better fruit. So would I. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about Daniel in hours. Not with pain, not with strategy, just absence. That surprised me more than anything else. Loss doesn't always feel like grief. Sometimes it feels like space. I sat at the table with my tea and looked around the quiet house. I wasn't lonely. I was contained, whole. A woman living inside the boundaries she finally allowed herself to draw. The house stood steady around me, unchanged by my choices, but improved by my presence. And for the first time in a long while, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was the moment after the noise stops, when you hear your own breath again. I woke up earlier than usual the morning everything finally felt finished. Not resolved, finished. There's a difference you recognize only after living through enough unfinished things. The house was quiet, but not tense. Quiet the way it used to be before anyone measured me against their convenience. I made tea and stood by the window, watching a woman across the street walk her dog. Ordinary life moving forward, indifferent to my private battles. That indifference felt like mercy. Later that day, I went to the small safe in my closet and took out the last folder. Not documents this time. Letters, old birthday cards, a few notes Daniel had written when he was younger, back when he still believed I was the center of his world instead of a resource. I read them slowly, without bitterness. Love doesn't become fake just because it ends badly. I didn't throw them away. I placed them in a box and put it back. Memory is not the enemy. Confusion is. In the afternoon, Emily came over again. She didn't bring anything this time. She didn't need to. "I told my parents I won't discuss your finances anymore," she said calmly, "or your decisions." I nodded. "That must have been hard." "It was necessary," she replied. "You taught me that. Just late." We sat together on the back steps, the apple tree above us nearly bare now. She leaned her head against my shoulder the way she used to when she was small. I didn't stiffen. I didn't worry about becoming needed again. Need, when it's clean, doesn't drain you. Before she left, she turned to me. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" I thought carefully. Regret is a heavy word. "I regret waiting," I said, "not acting." That night, I slept deeply. No rehearsed conversations, no imagined apologies, just rest. Weeks passed. Daniel didn't come back. He sent one message, short and neutral. I replied with the same tone. Polite distance settled between us, firm as a fence. It wasn't warm, but it was safe. Sometimes safety is the most loving thing left. The house settled into me again. I rearranged the bookshelf, planted winter bulbs, fixed the squeak on the third stair myself. I didn't rush. I didn't prove anything. I lived. One evening, as I locked the front door, I realized something quietly remarkable. I was no longer bracing. My shoulders weren't lifted. My jaw wasn't tight. My body had stopped waiting for permission. At 72, people expect you to shrink, to soften, to accept discomfort as gratitude. They confuse endurance with virtue and silence with grace. I had done that for years, thinking love meant leaving room for others even if it erased me. I know better now. Love that costs you dignity is not love. Family that requires your disappearance is not family, and peace that depends on your obedience is not peace at all. I didn't win anything. I reclaimed something. There's a difference. I kept my home. I protected my future. I showed my granddaughter what it looks like when a woman stops negotiating her worth. Quietly, legally, without shouting. That is the kind of legacy I'm proud to leave. If this story sounded familiar, if you've ever been told to step aside, to sign something for everyone's good, to stay quiet for the sake of peace, then remember this. You are allowed to say no, at any age, without apology. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, told without shouting and without lies, then stay here. Leave a comment. Let other women know they are not imagining it.